And I would like to introduce speakers of the next session, which will discuss OLIP's 2-year progress report and new data on immigration in Ottawa. Speakers for the sessions are Karim El-Assal. Karim El-Assal is the OLIP Associate in Immigration Policy and Research. We have Dominique Dennery, who was born in Haiti. Dominique came to Ottawa at the age of 3, a Black Canadian, fluently bilingual in both official languages. She grew up immersed in immigrant communities in the city, where she has lived aside from a few years overseas for 6 years. In December 2022, Dominique became the OLIP chair. Last but not least, we have Luisa Veronis, is a full professor in geography and holds a research chair in Francophone immigration in Ontario at the University of Ottawa. Her research examines the social and political geographies of immigration, integration, and belonging in Canada, with a special interest in Francophone immigration. She privileges collaborative and comparative research approaches using qualitative methodologies. A round of applause for our guest. We will start with Mr. Karim El-Assal.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. It's great to be back in Ottawa. So my remarks are going to be an extension of our first session, and we're also going to hear more about it later from my fellow panelists, as well as in this event itself. I've been asked to provide an overview of the latest immigration and temporary resident trends in the Ottawa-Gatineau region over the last few years. What I also want to do is provide a forecast based on available data and knowledge that we have on what immigration trends could look like in this region over the next 5 years. And then thirdly, I want to talk about some of the pressing issues that we're facing today with respect to immigration in the National Capital Region, as well as issues that may impact immigration in this region over the foreseeable future. So, unsurprisingly, Ottawa-Gatineau is enjoying very strong immigration levels in recent years, which corresponds with a significant increase in Canada's immigration increases nationally. However, the rate of growth in this region has been far more significant than at the national level. So, Canada has increased its immigration levels by about 50% since 2017. However, here in this region, we've experienced a growth rate of over 230%. And so as a result, Ottawa-Gatineau is now welcoming 4% of all new permanent residents welcomed by Canada each year. And this stands in comparison to 2.6% in 2017. Last year, Ottawa-Gatineau landed over 17,000 immigrants. As we all know, the only component of our immigration system with a target is on the permanent resident side. Each year, by November 1st, the federal government is legally obliged to release its annual immigration levels plan. Last year, we welcomed over 437,000 immigrants. This year, the target is 465,000. And by 2025, the target, as we all know, is 500,000. Again, this is subject to revision when the government tables their new plan in a few weeks' time. What this all means on the balance of probabilities for Ottawa-Gatineau is we should see higher PR levels in this region moving forward. One of the reasons why it's significant that Ottawa-Gatineau is now up to 4% of the national share is the region is finally welcoming its demographic weight in terms of Canada's immigrants. And this is very important in terms of maintaining the region's population size respective to the rest of the country. And as well from an economic point of view, this is important because there's two ways to grow an economy. You need to grow the size of your labor force and you need to use them more productively. And so when you welcome your demographic weight, you're obviously supporting the first goal. In terms of who these PRs are, what's very interesting is at the national level, the majority of our immigrants arrive under the economic class, which is also the case here in Ottawa-Gatineau. However, the big difference is whereas nationally about 27% of our immigrants arrive through family sponsorship, it's the reverse here in this region. Last year, 27% arrived under refugee, humanitarian, and other classes. And a significant difference compared with the rest of Canada is last year, Ottawa-Gatineau welcomed 2,000 immigrants who were those who made an asylum claim to the IRB, and their asylum claim was accepted. The total number of immigrants who fell under this category in this region was 12%, compared with 5% nationally. In terms of the top source countries, this is also much different than at the national level. Nationally, about 27% of Canada's new immigrants now come from India. However, the distribution of the source countries in Ottawa-Gatineau is far broader. Only 12% of this region's immigrants come from India. And you can see the diversity of countries listed on your screen in terms of the top 10. I've underlined the Francophone countries. They obviously make up a greater share of the source countries of our global talent in Ottawa-Gatineau compared with the rest of the country. We're enjoying far greater success nationally in terms of promoting Francophone immigration outside of Quebec. For those of us that have been in the space for a while, we've gone tired of the promises of increasing Francophone immigration and not being able to achieve them. Last year, finally, after 30 years, the federal government achieved their goal of welcoming over 4% of Francophone immigrants outside of Quebec, right? And so obviously this region is benefiting from that. Recently, earlier this week, the Immigration Minister, Mark Miller, commented on the federal government's goals. He said that the government wants to aim higher. He thinks 5% is realistic. 6% is a notable target just because it would help to maintain the size of the Francophone population outside of Quebec. However, he says that one is going to be a bit more difficult, but it's something that they're looking towards as well. Huge reason why Ottawa-Gatineau's PR levels are increasing so significantly is due to the significant growth of the international student population. The number of international students who have transitioned from temporary to permanent residence over the last 6 years has tripled. Last year, we had a total of 4,500 people who transitioned from temporary to permanent residence. And this is making up obviously a greater share of the new PRs that are landing in this region. We're now up to 1/4 of our new PRs who are transitioning from TR to PR, compared with 1 in 5 prior to the pandemic. When we look at the settlement services and the uptake among newcomers in this region, we have seen an increase. However, it's not proportionate to the increase in the new PRs that are landing in Ottawa-Gatineau. And this is something that probably requires further exploration. As I noted at the outset, the growth in PRs is over 230%, but the uptake in settlement services is only 50%, right? And so there could be a variety of reasons for this. Could be a lack of awareness. Could be that previously, there was more demand among the newcomers in the region for settlement services compared with now. I think the best approach in terms of understanding this is conducting a survey in the Ottawa-Gatineau region among newcomers themselves to understand what their level of awareness is of the services, of those who access the services, what their experience has been like, and what suggestions they have in terms of how the services can be improved moving forward. What's very interesting from the data that OLIP was able to get from IRCC is that 12% of those who accessed IRCC-funded settlement services last year were former temporary residents, mostly international students. Why this is notable is because intuitively, we think that someone who has been in Canada and this region for 3, 4, 5 years as a temporary resident may have less of a need for settlement services. However, the data proves otherwise. And so this is something that we need to explore. We need to have ongoing dialogue on as a sector in terms of how we can open up eligibility for the temporary residents who are looking for settlement services. And again, this is an extension of our first session about the notion that temporary residents in Canada are no longer temporary. That was the paradigm for a long component of our immigration history. It's changed significantly over the last 10 years. Looking ahead, I'll try to simplify this for you as much as possible. Basically, what we've done here is we looked at what Ottawa's shares have been in terms of new PRs, new foreign workers, new international students, as well as settlement service uptake in recent years, and just map that out in terms of what that could look like moving forward. And so essentially, what we're looking at is roughly 20,000 new PRs, over 20,000 new PRs coming to this region by 2027, and roughly the same amount for new international students as well as new work permit holders in this region. Now, looking ahead, as I noted, there's several things that we need to be cognizant of. Of course, the levels plan that's coming out in the next few weeks. In addition to that, the most significant development likely to impact immigration in this region in the near term is going to be the next federal election, which is due legally by October of 2025. The major national parties, they have a consensus on immigration, whether it's NDP, Conservatives, or Liberals. We've only had conservative and liberal governments govern us nationally. And since the late 1980s, we've been very consistent from conservative to liberal government back to conservative, back to liberal in terms of ongoing increases on the PR side. The consensus on the immigration front is largely due to the demographic and economic need for higher levels of immigration. However, they do differ in terms of certain details. So for instance, the composition of the newcomers. Over the past 25 or so years, we've aimed to welcome more economic class immigrants. However, in recent times, because of global humanitarian crises, Canada has stepped up to the plate and increased the number of our refugee and humanitarian intake, right? And so these are things that may change based on the composition of our next government. Another big development, and this is a very positive one for the region, is the increase in the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program allocation. In addition to immigrants that are welcomed through federal economic class programs, the province of Ontario has its own immigration program, which it uses. However, one of the longstanding challenges is that most of these immigrants have landed in Toronto and the Greater Toronto area, which has come at the expense of the rest of the province. And so earlier this year, the federal and provincial ministers agreed to increase Ontario's allocation from the current level of about 9,000 per year to 18,000 by 2025. This is a major opportunity for not just Ottawa-Gatineau, but other smaller and medium-sized communities across the province to go to the province and say, hey, we need our fair share of newcomers so that we can also support our economic and labor force needs. Two other things that I want to touch on, and again, we touched on this earlier in the session. We're having more discussion nationally about challenges that are impacting us as a country. And unfortunately, immigrants are being implicated. So lack of housing. Again, federal government decided in the late 1980s, we are going to significantly increase immigration to address the challenges we're having with all the baby boomers retiring. And unfortunately, we haven't kept up in terms of new housing starts, right? So CMHC put out a report last year calling the situation a crisis. They are saying that we're only building about 220,000 new houses per year. We need to get this up to 450,000 per year, and we need to sustain this over the next decade, right? immigrants shouldn't be blamed for this, right? But nonetheless, we have to be cognizant of this discourse. And as a sector, what we need to do is basically identify ways where we can work with government and other stakeholders to address these issues so that it doesn't continue to negatively implicate newcomers. And the reason why this issue, housing and other issues such as affordability, et cetera, is so important is because we are starting to see an erosion in public support. So Debbie noted earlier that in Veronica's research continues to show high levels of support for immigration. Unfortunately, in newer surveys that have been conducting, including most recently by Nanos, we're starting to see a decline in support, right? Are immigrants the reason? No, but what's happening is because of the challenges we're all facing as Canadians with respect to inflation and affordability, et cetera, people are starting to look over their shoulders. So this is something that we're going to have to be very cognizant of moving forward. So thank you very much.
I realized when I was sitting up there that I couldn't manage the clicker, the mic, and some notes. So I'm here, and then I'll go sit back down again when it comes time for the comments. And you're welcome, Louisa, to come here or to stay at your seat. So good morning, everyone. I have the honor and the pleasure of presenting the progress report for the Ottawa Local Immigration Partnership for the last 2 years. It's a biannual conference. I was appointed chair late December of last year. And so I haven't been there for the 2 years, but I've had the pleasure of working with OLIP over the course of many years, doing some support and consulting in that field. So I will be speaking about the highlights of the report. If you want to know more, there's Hindia and her whole team here that can provide you with more information, but it's a lot of work during a pandemic context as well as after in what we're living right now, and the increase in immigration and the temporariness of this whole situation as well, the impact on Ottawa. So the remarks you'll see in this progress report that will be available as well is the first to introduce you to OLIP. How many of you have dealt with OLIP in the past? You could raise your hands. Okay, so it's the majority of you, but for others, I'll give you a high-level introduction of what OLIP is, and then give you some of the accomplishments of the last 2 years and bring some attention to how we're moving forward, and finish with some feedback from partners. Louisa, est-ce que je peux te demander de me passer ma bouteille d'eau? So my granddaughter gave me a cold during Thanksgiving, and I have the meds, but I may falter at times. So. And for those of you I didn't hug along the way, that's why. Folks, I know. Okay, no order for what? Okay, we'll figure it out. Okay. Oui, merci. Oui. On est cousins, hein? On s'est rendu compte qu'on était cousins. Yes, you know, if you have 2 Haitians in the room, they're likely cousins. Yeah, they know each other. So OLIP is 64 organization. I don't know if everyone realizes how large it is, working across 5 sectors. So we have a small secretariat, but many, many, many partners. So the sectors are the social civic integration, economic integration, health and care and social services, education, and language training. So we don't just focus on one aspect, but the whole life cycle of an immigrant to this region. I've been here since the 60s. I'm dating myself as a child. I'm not flicking. Okay, that would help, wouldn't it? Yeah. Okay. So I'll go to this one, which is to say, this is our partnership at a glance. It's a very good slide. You may not see all the details, but it shows you how much is housed under OLIP. And so our goal is one of building a more prosperous, vibrant, and inclusive Ottawa, strengthening through the integration of immigrants. So we position it as a community effort and not just an effort to be kind in some way to immigrants or bring them in for economic means alone. This is about making this region welcoming and strengthened and a better region for it. So to achieve this vision, we've established a shared strategy I'll get into. And there's 4 areas of impacts that will tell us whether there's success or not for the partnership. The economic immigration, of course, the development of a continuum for settlement, health, education, social services, relevant and accessible. The fact that we have public organizations that are equitable, so we work with organizations to make sure that their way of delivering services and supporting immigrants is equitable and inclusive, as well as ways to connect the community and keep the community vibrant. We have a flexible governance structure and process, and we keep refining that as we go to make sure we're there to address whatever priorities there are and changes that are happening in the context around us. So a small but mighty secretariat is there to support the partnership. And one of the reasons I took on this work is because of all the work you do, India, and the team that's here. It's incredible work in convening, facilitating, and supporting the partnership, the 64 partnership, and the sector tables in doing the work of OLIP. So I've selected some accomplishments that I wanted to highlight for you today, but that's out of a very long list of accomplishments. And the first one is the renewal of the Ottawa immigration strategy. So this was first started in 2011, and it's been renewed twice already, and I'll come back to it. The second piece to focus on is all the dialogues and the alignment, getting everyone to row in the same direction so that we have action taken, not just strategy in words. Then the support to strengthen the internal capacity of the organizations, as I mentioned earlier, and of course our very popular Welcoming Ottawa Week, which we hope will be, attended by more and more people and create the kind of vibrant community we need in Ottawa. And then the data capacity development. You've just heard Kareem speak about some of the data, and we continue to work with partners to produce more data to be able to make informed decisions. I'll share some feedback from our partners at the end as well. So moving to the first one, the strategy renewal, and this has a number of shared priorities. I won't read everything that's on the slide there, but the idea is for 2023 to 2027 to take some priorities. We've added housing, obviously, as a key priority, and shifted some of the wording of some of the other priorities as a partnership, so that we can reflect the times and move forward for the next 4 years. So it's renewed every 5 years to make sure it's relevant, and we incorporate the capacities and knowledge gained from the other exercises. So it took a year to do this because it's a partnership. It's not a question of some people in an ivory tower deciding what needs to be a strategy moving forward. It's a complex problem and challenge and wonderful opportunity as well. So 45 meetings and 203 participants, from executives to frontline workers and everybody in between. So we feel that the strategy is really grounded in community knowledge. It's not done by academics only and researchers, but definitely reflects the lived experience. We also want to draw your attention to the knowledge mobilization and building the relationships, and doing that through the COVID was an incredible revelator, if you like, of everything that was wrong with some of the ways in which society has been structured, and how we need to do differently, and what roles that immigrants can play there. So this has been very helpful to mobilize all this knowledge. And then we've expanded the scope as well, as I said, housing, but also skills development and safety. It's the safety of our communities. A lot of the safety conversations are focused on safety of property and establishment. And we're saying, what about our communities, the immigrant communities, the importance of their well-being and health. And I won't get into too much politics here, but just to say something important to reflect. So what we've done in terms of dialogues and collaboration, because that's what the partnership is all about, is to facilitate alignment. So having a strategy means that you can work with partners and then say, how are you aligned to the goals of the strategy, and what are you doing in your own environment to make this a reality, and put it in place in your planning. So there's a number of really good realizations there. We're looking at the city economic development strategy, being more aligned, the community safety and well-being plan for the city being more aligned, the anti-racism strategy of the city and the work done there to align both strategies. Primary care access has been a big focus, and collaborative plans with the Ottawa Public Health and Health Centers, and a number of efforts in terms of public health, of course, and equity, health equity. Black communities, health improvement plans as well with the Black Health Alliance, equity capacity development with 36 organizations, and the newest mental health and addictions crisis response strategy that is being piloted. So those are the ways, even with I forgot the immigration, regional immigration attraction strategies with all the lips of Eastern Ontario. But it's to say the goal is to align, the goal is to get strength in numbers and start to make changes at the structural level so that there's impacts on the communities that can be felt for years to come. So I guess I was supposed to click to the next one and talk to you about knowledge mobilization. The big advantage of having such a partnership is the depth of information and the ability to get together quickly to talk about, okay, how can we mobilize for housing? How can we mobilize for health? And during the pandemic was a strong example. So some further examples here, the community dialogues. This is an ongoing, very successful process that OLIP has, and we applied that to primary care access, as I mentioned, and also during the Welcoming Ottawa Week, making sure that there were a lot of community dialogues, and it wasn't done to people, but with people. Looking at things like data capacity, which I've mentioned, so important to ensure that what we request and ask for is based on this important data, but also impact analysis and impact stories. So where, what difference is it making? And the answer is a lot. So back to data, always important for decision makers to make sure that there's strong data. So data partnership with IRCC, that was a milestone. There's so much data available there, and they've made it accessible to us. And so we've been able to take this data and create policy suggestions, recommendations, changes there to support further integration of immigrants to this National Capital Region. A number of consultations were held to see what are the needs, what are the gaps, and then these were filled. Lots of hard work to produce these data tables, the dashboards. So if you're interested, there's quite a lot of work that has been done and that is accessible to our partners. So what's exciting about that is that IRCC has recognized OLIP as a leader in this field and is using this model with other LIPs, other local immigration partnerships in the rest of the country. So kudos to Hindia and her team. So when we talk about pathways, we always have to keep in mind, what is our progress over the years? Are we going to where we want to go? Are we producing, very good measurable success impacts, etc.? And so we have some sector tables that are very active in helping us with this pathway. And so some examples include the settlement and integration capacity development sector table that have shifted their efforts towards becoming even more equitable and inclusive of immigrants and racialized residents. The Centertown Community Health Center co-founded the Equity Ottawa and its community of practice. How many of you are part of the community of practice for equity in this? You might want to, so there's 2 or 3 people, go meet with them at lunch and find out. This is one of the very successful community of practice. People learn a lot, share a lot, very honest conversations about how to, change many of the services and programs that are taken for granted in health, education, social services, using an equity lens, right? And then there's also one more thing I wanted to mention, and that is the collective action plan for equity there. For several years, there's an action plan for how to move forward, whether it's with human resources, employment, service planning, monitoring, accountability, etc. So there's some solid information that all of you who are doing research in this area are looking at developing policies or programs can access through OLIP. So this is a particular effort to help organizations, the 64 organizations, become more inclusive and equitable. So over the last 2 years, it's the communities of practice, the different knowledge events, like this one is a knowledge event, of course, having the development of a number of tools and resources that are all accessible to our partners, and then providing guidance to some of the most senior executives in many of these organizations that come to OLIP and say, how do I do this? You know, we've tried this and this, why isn't it working, etc. So this is, we've provided a safe space for 32 organizations to have these conversations and 20 community of practice sessions over this period of 2.5 years. The knowledge events, custom tools I've mentioned as well, but some of the results of all of this, strong relations of trust and commitment. I've seen it in action when we had special conversations around the strategy and housing in particular, common language and knowledge along the continuum of partners. People speak the same language and are able to create common solutions. Increased commitment, we see it in the actions the partners are taking, and more leadership engagement at senior levels, like you saw with the presence of the mayor and the work we do with many parts of the city, but also colleges and hospitals and etc. So it is to continue this collective effort of advancing equity and inclusion together. You can do a lot on your own, but if your partners are also on the same wavelength and getting the support they need, you'll go faster, of course, together. So let me talk about Welcome Ottawa Week. Just a few more slides for you here on these 2 years of accomplishment. So WOW is an annual event. How many people have participated in WOW? Yeah, I'd like to see that show of hands. And so WOW is a beautiful acronym for it. The idea is to improve the quality of interactions among residents. We heard of some of the programs, the Quebec government, merci, merci cousin. The Quebec government has, you know, taking integration one step further, having families talk to each other. We have our WOW, which enables people to meet each other, to have activities together, to break bread together, to listen to conferences and events, and to start to become more aligned. So it's intentional, and it's done with the purpose of integration, and it's also fun. So it's not just about you know, numbers and actions and statistics. It's very much about connecting at a human level, all of us. And in 2014, OLIP introduced the annual Welcoming Ottawa Ambassador Awards. Those are really popular. Folks come with their families, and it recognizes people who've made a real difference in the life of immigrants. So prepare your ballots for next year, people that you think should be honored as ambassadors for their welcoming attitudes and support. And when they spoke, it was very much from the heart and about having the experience of a community of family with people that they brought in and supported in their journeys, particularly those first few years as an immigrant. There's a immigrant heritage walking tour. That's kind of cool. I went to a showing around the destruction of Chinatowns all over North America. That was very, very informative and interesting and sad. And looking at the successive cohorts of immigrants and how we've developed Ottawa and the neighborhoods is really eye-opening. And so we're working with Renfrew Lanark. You wouldn't think of them as welcoming Ottawa necessarily, folks, but they are. And very interested in being part of this and bringing people to them and showing their hospitality and leveraging the intellectual capital, you know, of immigrants for their regions. So these are some of the highlights. This is big. I'd been at some WOW events over the years, but when I went this year, like, there's a lot. So please, if you can, join us for this very celebration of what immigration is about. Yes, there's a lot of issues, and we have complex issues to solve. Let's do it in a way that promotes discovery, dialogue, connection, you know, and lots of events. People can submit their events and then start developing either town halls, sporting activities, cultural events, guided tours, storytelling. It's the sky's the limit there. We started this year with an annual distinguished lecture series. So we had Senator Andrew Cardoso talk to us to celebrate the 10th anniversary of WOW. It's been 10 years already. And just want to recognize all the people who make this happen. This is truly a community effort, and it's a very joyful and rewarding one. So I'll show you one more slide to give you a sense. No, two more. This is one more after that. OLIP is us. So look at all these organizations. I mean, you can't read all of them. You might recognize yourself in many of them, but it's partners. It's not one organization, it's 64. And it's the sum of those 64 organizations that change the landscape for immigrant integration in this region. And so I want to recognize the accomplishment of all the partners, many of whom are here in this room. And though we're still young as an organization when you consider some of the other structures that are around, but the hope is to continue this growth for decades to come. This is what folks say about OLIP, and you might not be able to read this. I'll read a few. And and it's an invitation really for folks to join in a way. Being a part of OLIP allows us to be at the forefront of emerging innovation and information through partners and stakeholders. So those sector table meetings make a huge difference and people hearing firsthand about what needs to change and what to do and best practices that are out there. You'll see another one where we talk about the impact on the community. It's not just conversations for the sake of conversations, it's dialogue to get things changed. And it supports newcomers to the community. You'll see the one about commend you for your dedication and commitment to this work and the important strategic initiatives that, you know, that's what really aligns and moves people towards in the same direction for immigrants, refugees, and racialized people in Ottawa. Kudos to you. It's a pleasure and honor to be part of those tables. And one I don't want to forget to say is I worked with India and OLIP partners on various files of my organization. I value the endless guidance, support, leadership, generosity, I would add, that OLIP provides. So thank you very much for listening to this 2-year report on OLIP. And thank you to India. Et j'ai pas parlé français, qui est pourtant ma langue maternelle, mais ce que j'aimerais dire, c'est que si vous avez des questions en français, n'hésitez surtout pas à en poser, que ce soit sur ce qu'a dit mon collègue Karim avant, ou ce que je viens de présenter, et ce que Louisa va commenter par la suite. Hein? Merci. Kevin, can we have my students for you?
No.
Okay.
Bonjour tout le monde, merci d'être là. Et je sais que nous avons déjà eu 2 tables rondes très intenses, donc je vais garder des commentaires très courts. On m'a demandé de faire un commentaire général, mais après tout ce qui a été dit dans le rapport, je ne sais pas quoi dire. I'm speechless. Thank you very much, India, OLIP, and our research team for inviting me. It's really an honor. C'est vraiment un plaisir. J'ai eu la chance de suivre les progrès et développement de OLIP depuis 2010, l'année où j'ai rencontré India, et j'ai eu beaucoup de plaisir à travailler avec elle sur de nombreux projets. Je vais parler surtout en anglais, mais je serai contente de vous répondre en français. So what can we say? Whoa, I guess, is the main logo. And I think the new organigram, the rendition of OLIP is very telling. As Elder Commanda was saying, a lot of what the history of the area has been is about opening our home, our house, welcome people, also feed them. And OLIP has been expanding. It reminded me of the story, it's, I guess in French, un conte sur les 3 petits cochons qui ont construit la maison de paille, la maison de bois et la maison de pierre. Et donc, OLIP went through this process of making the house bigger, more comfortable, more sophisticated, but always expanding and making room for everyone. And so I really enjoyed seeing the new rendition. So as I think Debbie Douglas mentioned earlier, the roots of the local immigration partnerships go back to 2005 with the signing of the Canada-Ontario Immigration Agreement, and LIPs were conceived in 2008 and then put in place. So yesterday at our partnership meeting, Lisa Alfieri was saying several times, good policy, bad plan. With OLIP, we have good policy, excellent plan. So I really want to stress on the slide with a pathway that, you know, having a policy, having ideas and objectives, and actually putting them in place, implementing them, building them takes a lot of vision, but also a lot of action and capacity. And OLIP has really managed, I think, in my humble opinion, to create something. I know Kenya had a lot of visions. The one I remember in particular is data and knowledge, which has always been there. But I had no idea, how you would put this in place. And I saw several attempts, and I'm so happy to see that now OLIP is a model for how to gather data, collect data, but also, and that was something else we were discussing yesterday, how academics have excellent data and research, but it takes so long for them to produce it. And then how do you share the data, and how do you make it implementable in practice? Well, OLIP has done that. And this is a major, major feat. So back in 2011, I was at the launch of the first Ottawa immigration strategy, and there was a lot of excitement, and there is still as much excitement and even more today. And so I wanted to go back to the title of today's forum about building newcomer integration infrastructure. What is infrastructure? As you all know, the 64 organizations and more, infrastructure is about services, programs, people delivering on the front line, the know-how, the funding, applying for funding, not getting the funding, developing collaborations, and then delivering the programs, but also adapting to needs. But infrastructure is also the need to have a systemic view of the strengths and weaknesses of the existing infrastructure, and being able to foresee change and need and adaptation and to put it in place. So OLIP has brought that capacity, that ability, but also very strong advocacy, and the fact that OLIP speaks with IRCC and is able to get the things that are needed done, not only here, but elsewhere, is really commendable. So I think OLIP, and one of the words somewhere in the presentation is commitment. I think on the blue here, commitment to progress. So OLIP has had that commitment over and over again. So OLIP, when it was put in place, and going back to the idea of infrastructure and networks, had a vision, had to put the plan in place. OLIP has been exceptional, and I'm sure this is the case in a lot of other places, but to start with what was already here. And Ottawa was quite unique in having, back in the old days, I think it was Lassie, the local agents serving immigrants coalition, who were already dialoguing, speaking together, meeting. So OLIP leveraged that existing infrastructure, and Ottawa was probably unique or different from other cities in the sense that the city, the municipality, didn't really have an immigration lens or immigration focus, even though the delivery, particularly the community and resource centers, obviously were attuned to the local needs of the neighborhoods. But one of the great achievements of OLIP was this expansion, the expanding scope. In particular, breaking those silos between the immigrant agencies and all the other sectors, creating very strong intersectoral collaborations across the board with many innovations. The one that's, to me, comes into my mind is the Newcomer Health Clinic, for example, among many other innovations in this across-sectoral collaborations. And you may have wondered, what social and political geography is about and what it has to do with immigration. We speak about scale a lot. So OLIP has scaled up and out, but also inwards and deep at different scales, expanding the newcomer and immigration lens across all the sectors and services of the city, but also with the equity action plan within organizations to create equitable organizations. And so this speaks to, again, the vision and putting the plan in place and using existing collaborations, and instead of imposing a plan, that they thought, this is where we have to go, this is the route we should take, to really work locally through, I don't know if consensus might be a strong word, but at least with the spirit of consensus of having dialogues, exchanges, collaborations that were accelerated through crisis. I know the word crisis is sometimes, whose crisis or from whose perspective, but intense moments that needed change, including the Syrian refugee resettlement, the pandemic, further refugee initiatives that have in fact accelerated some of the things that OLIP wanted to put in place. And so we've seen a real strengthening, and again, the House with, moving from fragile shack into building layers that make it really, really solid. So in terms of the title, I touched a little bit on infrastructure, networks, so the existing collaborations among the agencies serving immigrants in Ottawa that served as a basis that OLIP leveraged, expanded, and insisted very much on the work that has been put into creating alignments. So OLIP has really organically facilitated like a Socratic approach, la sage-femme, to deliver by making its partners, the organizations, the workers, executive directors, immigrants, all part of the conversation so that together we reach the agreement of what it is we need to do for the next steps. And this makes for a very solid outcome. So another element was knowledge. And so I commented on the importance of data, knowledge, but also in particular, making the knowledge accessible in formats that are understandable, digestible, and usable, particularly on the front lines to communities, and using the data to put in place plans and policy. So policy was the last one. And in this idea, good policy, bad plan, is the policy comes last, is through these discussions and collaborations that the plan is put in place and the policy is made possible. So thank you to OLIP, the mighty secretariat, for being there and doing all this work.